$11 billion. That is the combined value of rail projects actively moving through procurement on the African continent right now. And on July 7th and 8th, the people who control those budgets will all be in one room. In Johannesburg, the Lobito Corridor, Process National Recovery Program, Kenya's $8.5 billion SGR extension, Egypt's 2,000-kilometer high-speed network. Every one of these projects, the contractors, the operators, the financiers, represented at Africa Rail 2026. In this video, I'm going to break down every major project on the continent, show you who from those projects is actually at the fair, and tell you exactly which country has the most active procurement pipeline right now. I'll save the answer to that last question for the end, because once I show you the numbers, you'll understand why it matters so much for your strategy. Let's go. Africa Rail is not just another trade show. This is the 26th edition of the largest and most established rail event on the African continent. Over 5,000 attendees, 120 exhibitors, 150 speakers, 2 full days of conference tracks, and an exhibition floor that covers every segment of the rail value chain. What makes it different from European or Middle Eastern shows is who's in the room on the buyer's side. We're not talking about procurement managers. We're talking about CEOs, managing directors, and general managers of national railway corporations, the people who sign off on billion-dollar decisions. Dr. Frederick Apo, CEO of Ghana Railways, is speaking. Stanley Chariot, General Manager of Kenya Railways Corporation, is speaking. The Business Development Director and ICT Director of Ethiopian Railways Corporation are both here. The Nigerian Railway Corporation Managing Director is on the agenda. And critically, PRASA and Transit, ET Engineering are strategic partners of the event itself. Not sponsors, strategic partners. That tells you everything about the relationship between South Africa's rail sector and this fair. If you're a contractor, a supplier, a consultant, or an investor in African rail, and you're not at Africa Rail 2026, you're missing the room where the deals get structured. Let me take you through the major projects driving this market right now. These are not concepts. These are projects with budgets, with procurement processes in motion, and with decision makers who will be physically in the building on July 7th. Project 1, the Lobito Corridor, Angola, Zambia, DRC. This is arguably the most consequential rail project on the continent. Approximately 1,300 kilometers of open-access transcontinental freight line, linking Angola's Atlantic port of Lobito Strait through to the copper-producing heartland of the DRC in Zambia. The EPC bids for the first 2 sections, an 800-kilometer greenfield stretch, are now under evaluation. Total corridor cost, north of $6.6 billion. Financing from the Africa Finance Corporation, the U.S. Development Finance Corporation, and the Development Bank of Southern Africa is confirmed. When this line is complete, transit times from the Copperbelt to Atlantic ports drop from 45 days to under 15. That is an incremental improvement. That is a structural transformation of mineral export economics across Central Southern Africa. Project 2, South Africa, PRASA Corridor Recovery. PRASA, the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, is in the middle of the most significant passenger rail restructuring in the country's history. 35 of 40 corridors have been recommissioned. Current annual ridership is 77 million. The government target, 250 to 450 million trips per year. And to get there, a national rail master plan has been announced, with a planned budget of 1.3 trillion rand. Rolling stock, signaling, Maintenance, all coming to market. Project 3, Transnet Freight Liberalization. South Africa just opened its freight rail network to private operators for the first time. 11 private freight train operators have been granted access to 41 routes across 6 key corridors: coal, iron, ore, chromium, manganese, sugar, fuel. And a 25-year concession for the Richards Bay Dry Bulk Terminal is coming to tender. The African Development Bank has already provided a $1 billion corporate loan to Transnet to support the recovery. This is not a repair job. This is a market restructuring, and it creates an entirely new category of procurement opportunity for both operators and equipment suppliers. Project 4, Kenya, Uganda SGR Extension. In March 2026, Presidents Ruto and Museveni stood side by side in Kisumu to launch construction of the Naivasha, Kisumu, Malaba Standard Gauge Railway Extension. 264 kilometers of main line, 107 kilometers to the Uganda border. Estimated total investment, $8.5 billion. When complete, freight costs on this corridor fall 35%. And for the first time, the port of Mombasa is directly connected by modern rail to the Ugandan interior. Project 5, Egypt, 2,000 kilometers high-speed rail. Siemens Mobility is building Africa's first high-speed rail network. 2,000 kilometers, 41 Valero trains, each carrying 489 passengers, were publicly debuted in November 2025. Africa's first, and the supply chain contracts around this project, power systems, signaling, telecommunications, station equipment, extend well beyond the prime contractor. Projects 6 through 11, rapid sequence. Tanzania's Central Corridor SGR, 5 phases, $1.2 billion in AFD-led financing. Dar, Dodoma passenger service already running. Morocco's Kenitra, Marrakesh high-speed extension, 430 kilometers, 53 billion dirhams. That's $5.3 billion. Procurement process launched in 2025. Algeria's Gardia, El Minya Railway, 230 kilometers of new line. Expression of interest for supervision consultancy issued in 2026. The CTO of Rail Al Lecture, a GCF subsidiary, is speaking at the fair. Vonner Railways, master plan under development. CEO on stage at Africa Rail. That means conversations with him are happening in this building. Ethiopian Railways Corporation is actively seeking partners for the Addis Ababa corridor expansion. 2 of their senior directors are speaking. In South Africa's Gauteng high-speed rail, Pretoria to Polokwane, 500 kilometers, feasibility complete. Construction is slated to begin before the end of 2026. That is 11 projects, 11 live pipeline opportunities, and the authorities behind every one of them are represented at this fair. Now let me shift the frame. Most fair breakdowns focus on who's selling. I want to talk about who's buying, because that's what actually determines where the opportunity is. At Africa Rail 2026, you have the following institutional buyers physically in the building. PRASA, strategic partner, actively procuring rolling stock, maintenance services, and signaling systems for corridor recovery. Transnet Engineering, strategic partner, procurement for freight rehabilitation, concession-related equipment, and maintenance. Ghana Railways Corporation, their CEO is on stage. That means their procurement leadership is accessible for direct conversation. Kenya Railways Corporation, General Manager presenting. Active SGR Extension Program. Supply chain requirements open. Ethiopian Railways Corporation, 2 senior directors, active on both Addis Network and regional corridor expansion. Nigerian Railway Corporation, managing director on the agenda. Nigeria's rail program is the largest by population served in West Africa. This is not a list of people you would normally get in the same room. They are here because this fair is where African rail decisions get structured. Their presence is the signal. Now, let's look at the supply side and how to think about it strategically. 120 plus exhibitors. I've grouped them into 6 sectors: rolling stock and traction. Alstom, diamond sponsor, with their South African entity operating alongside Jabila, the joint venture they run with Prasa for local train production. Wabtec Corporation from the US, BBM Officine Mechanich from Italy, Koning from the Netherlands, Track and Infrastructure. This is the largest category by a number of firms. Placer South Africa, SSAB Special Steels, Sweden, providing the high-strength rail steel that underpins any serious freight corridor. Edelon Seadra from the Netherlands for embedded track systems. Getzner from Austria, vibration isolation. Linsinger from Austria, rail grinding and milling, and a strong Chinese manufacturing presence. CRSBG, Anyang Railway Equipment, Jinzhou Taigong, Wuhan Linkage Track Equipment. These firms are active on projects across the continent and their pricing. G creates the competitive reference point for every other supplier. Signaling and digital. Siemens Mobility, networking lounge sponsor with their South African team. Funkworks Systems from Germany, specialists in GSMR and train communication. Fortel from Australia, train management and network monitoring. Genetec from Canada, physical security and access control. Dassault Systems from France, digital twin and engineering simulation. Power and electrical, Cetrion from Switzerland, traction power and DC switchgear. Thermo cables and compressed air dryers from South Africa. Local manufacturing for project supply chains. And at the institutional level, the European Commission is here. The Polish Investment and Trade Agency is here. EPC India, the Engineering Export Promotion Council, is here representing a group of Indian manufacturers. That cluster of government-backed trade pavilions is the entry point for firms looking to understand what geopolitical financing is attached to which projects. Now, a critical point for international firms. You will not win major African rail contracts without local content. Most national procurement frameworks, South Africa's BBB requirements, local content thresholds on World Bank, and AFDB-funded projects require meaningful local partnership. The South African firms here are not competition. They are your route to market. Jabila is the structural template. Alstom with a local joint venture, manufacturing trains in Ekurhuleni, meeting Pronson's local content requirements. That model is replicable. DBM Friction, BFG Africa Rail, Wernix Engineering, Thermotrex. These are the firms that can fulfill the local content requirement and give an international supplier the compliance profile to bid. Before I get to the reveal, 3 things that most visitors to Africa Rail will miss. First, the finance architecture of the fair is more important than the products. KFWI Pax Bank has a speaker on stage, Sayabong Nzaba, VP of Business Development for the Mobility Sector. UKF, UK Export Finance, has a speaker. The European Commission is on the exhibition floor. This is the moment when you map which European export credit is attached to which project and which supplier nationalities benefit. If you are entering a new African market, understanding the financing stack before you engage the buyer is the difference between a competitive bid and an expensive lesson. Second, the insurance and risk layer is underdeveloped and therefore high value. Alpha Insure and Bright Choice Africa are the only insurance sector exhibitors. On a continent with 11 active major rail projects and an emerging private freight operator market, the construction risk, operational risk, and the political risk capacity is structurally insufficient. This is a white space. Third, the Chinese supply chain is re-entering African rail at scale. 5 Chinese infrastructure and manufacturing firms are exhibiting. CRSBG, China Railway Shanhaiguan Bridge Group, has been active in African bridge and rail civil works for decades. Anyang Railway Equipment, Jinzhou Taigan, Wuhan Linkage Track Equipment, all present. Combined with the Lobedo Corridor's alignment with US and EU strategic interests, you have a supply chain tension point building. For procurement and EPC strategy, understanding where Chinese suppliers are price competitive and where political constraints will block them is a critical risk filter. Earlier I asked, which country has the most active procurement pipeline right now? The answer is South Africa, and it is not close. Hey Race Y. 3 separate concurrent procurement processes, all moving in 2026. 1. Cross-quarter recovery. Rolling stock, signaling, maintenance contracts, all coming to market as ridership targets require urgent acceleration. 2. Transnet freight liberalization. 11 new private operators entering the network. A 25-year Richards Bay terminal concession about to be tendered. A $1 billion AFDB loan in place. 3. Gauteng high-speed rail. Pretoria to Polokwane. Construction starting before year-end. Feasibility done. 3 programs. Different agencies. Different financing. Different supply chain profiles. Same country. Same fare. That is why PRASA and Transnet are strategic partners here, not just sponsors. They're not showcasing, they're sourcing. If you're a contractor or supplier with capacity in, do you leave this fair without a structured conversation with both institutions? You have left money on the table. Pause, direct to camera. Here's what to do now. Step 1. Register for Africa Rail 2026 is free to attend. The link is in the description. Step 2. Download the exhibitor reference list I have prepared for this video. Every firm, every sector, every country, filterable and searchable. Subscribe to Rail Compass. Comment exhibitor list below, and it'll send it to you directly. Step 3. Identify your 3 target conversations before July 7th. Buyer, local partner, and competitor. Go in with a plan, not a badge. Step 4. Subscribe to Rail Compass and hit the bell. Next Thursday, I'm releasing the full supplier map for Africa Rail, who makes what projects they're aligned to and where the supply chain white spaces actually are. The opportunities are real. The buyers are in the room, and now you know exactly who they are.
They'll see you at the fair, or he'll see you in the next video.